This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today it's Friday. It's January 5th, 2024. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing a podcast every weekday. You can follow me on Twitter. I've gotten much more active on Twitter, at Corsi, C-O-R-S-I, Jerome, J-E-R-O-M-E, 1. Altogether, you can see it on the screen. Those listening by audio only, at Corsi Jerome 1. On Twitter. Tomorrow we're going to do at 4 o'clock on Twitter, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, tomorrow being January 6th, we're going to do a space, and it's going to be about my writings. One of the online universities is going to do a course on my books and my writing, so it'll be interactive with me. You can see it on Twitter. We'll post it here on thetruthcentral.com. It will be a 14-week session in which we're going to talk about how to write high-impact books. And I think it's going to be very interesting because it'll be direct contact with the students. It'll be an interactive course, and I'll be answering questions and explaining various of the books I've written, what impact they had, how they were written, what design they had, what the politics are behind them. So I think for those of you who are interested in writing, or in understanding how politics can be influenced by writing, this will be a good course, and I will recommend it. We will have it on the thetruthcentral.com website next week. Also, I've now got a Substack, and that's also on the thetruthcentral.com. Chris will show it to you in a minute, but my Substack is Jerome Corsi, PhD.substack.com. And that's all together. Jerome Corsi, PhD, no spaces or periods or anything else, .substack.com. And Chris is showing you right there on the right. That's the Substack. You can go directly to the Substack. And I'm trying to get topics up there and be able to really design a good Substack that will, I think, over the next few weeks, have a lot of content to it. And I'll be excerpts from my books, some new writing that I'm doing. It'll be a way to really get out and express current views and deep thinking in a way that's not going to be censored. So Substack, I think, is a good environment at the moment, and hopefully it will stay a good environment for some time in order for us to really be able to get the word out. Jerome Corsi, PhD.substack.com. Okay, let's cover what's in the news today, and we've got quite a bit I want to cover today. But let's start with the fact that Israel has now announced a new policy, a new initiative in the war. Essentially, right now, Israel has taken over Gaza largely. So the first attack was in the north, where Gaza City was, and the Hamas was cleaned out of Gaza City. Then Israel turned its attention to the southern part of Gaza. Gaza, as we pointed out, is this narrow strip of land. It's on the Mediterranean in Israel, just north of Egypt. And the defense minister yesterday, Gallant, announced that this is a new phase, that they're going to return some of the military to work, to their jobs. Of course, there's increasing international pressure on Israel to reduce the combat operations, and I think Israel to some extent will comply, but they're not going to stop. So in the northern region of the Gaza, what they're going to do is transition to a new combat approach in accordance with the military achievements on the ground, which is going to focus on cleaning out these tunnels, conducting raids, destroying the tunnels, various air strikes, and ground strikes, special forces operation. In other words, they're going to try to target the remaining Hamas leaders and members to eliminate them. They're going to try to kill Hamas as much as they can. In the south, where Gaza's 2.3 million population is now living, of course, many have fled Gaza, and these people are living in temporary shelters, tents. The operation is going to continue in the south, and I would guess there's going to be more intensive action in the south with more targeted strikes in the north. I think that's the new phase of the war. And Israel is going to be determined to eliminate Hamas. I don't think Israel is going to return the control of Gaza to Hamas. But again, I don't think that Israel is necessarily going to put Israelis into Gaza. The Palestinians have had this as their territory, and they'll probably return after the war is over. So this is going to be a delicate situation, because with the return of the Palestinians and Palestinian control of Gaza, it's almost inevitable that Hamas will return. And this is just another temporary solution to a problem that has no solution, because when you deal with Iran, who is behind Hamas, funding Hamas, Iran and Hamas are dedicated to the destruction of Israel. They want to kill the Jews and they want to destroy Israel. Well, this does not have a solution, because even if you had a two-state approach to the problem, Hamas would only take the creation of a Palestinian state as the first stage in eliminating Israel altogether. In other words, they would take the incremental gain of a Palestinian state not as a solution to the problem, but as a win in the advance towards eliminating Israel. And that's the fundamental problem in the Middle East, is that the radical Islamicists do not want to accept a Jewish state in the Middle East, and that's going to be a continuing problem. As you can see, we're redoing the homepage, and we're trying to get some more space in here for making sure you know where to go on the website, various websites. I'm going to have Chris in a minute explain the various places where we are broadcasting, because I want you to be able to follow us on many channels. And I am getting more active on the social media. We're going to be kind of going into a new phase here of trying to get out more. This is an election year, and I've decided not to be retired. I'm going to get more active again and trying to comment and on the political scene. So, Chris, you want to just do a couple minutes on the redesign here of the website and where we're going?
Oh, this website is like what Barack Obama thinks of the Constitution, a living, breathing website. I'm kidding there, but it is. We're making changes. We want to make it interesting for people who keep coming back to us, and we want to thank you for that. A couple of things we have. We're still going to have the outlets here. I'm going to switch them around as well, so you can find all sorts of outlets. I just added the podcast. What was it? The Podcast Republic channel that Dr. Corsi is on. But we also have an easy way to get the books, and there's an even easier way to pick up Dr. Corsi's books, including the new one coming up about JFK very, very soon. We're going to make it a direct and easy one, because I have people saying, "Hey, Chris, why don't you make it a little easier for us to get the books instead of having to click onto Amazon?" And I say, well, there is something better, and it's coming, so keep an eye out for it. And yes, you can find Dr. Corsi uncensored on Substack. Click on the Substack link. I put it here on the right side. You'll see it on every page here as well. Click on it and become part of this page. It's very interesting. You're going to find things here that we cannot say on YouTube or even on the regular podcast, because, well, we'll get shadow banned, canceled, or even outright grab a strike on some of these outlets. You can also find Dr. Corsi's audio podcast right here. And that's this one. That's right, the Truth Central, and all the episodes are listed right here. Same with our favorite sponsor, our great sponsor here, the Swiss America, their Secret War on Cash podcast, and that's rather interesting as well. It's worth the few minutes to take a listen to that. You can also find Dr. Corsi on all sorts of social media. That's on the left side.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I want to cover more on this Claudine Gay story, the president of Harvard, who resigned this week in the scandal over the plagiarism, which he evidently is engaged in rampantly. There's an article by Christopher Rufo, and Christopher Rufo is at the Manhattan Institute. He's the author of The America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. And the article is, I think, an interesting venture into saying there are tactics here to combat woke, which are effective. And I think we're learning this now, learning how to combat this woke. the woke is essentially the product of neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism. We're going through a cultural revolution in the United States, a Maoist cultural revolution in which the left controls everything. I want to read you a paragraph or two from my book here on the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. Then we're going to turn to how we deal with this problem. What are we going to do to beat this? In the introduction to the book, I start out by saying, and Chris will show you the cover of the book, what I start out by saying is a dark, evil ideology has descended over America. Universities across the country have indoctrinated a generation of young adults with the idea that America is a racist nation founded by slaveholders who perpetuate social injustice. This dangerous neo-Marxist generation, the first ever to rise in this land, is rapidly gaining power, pervading the federal bureaucracy, politicizing our institutions of justice, dominating our military, setting out to control the Supreme Court, and willing to steal the presidency if needed. Trained in the techniques of critical theory, these young revolutionaries are in the process of imposing a totalitarian standard of their truths on all who dare oppose them. That's what's going on. Now, I end this introduction to the book, and the book shows you how this woke has developed through hundreds of years of political thought, going back actually some to Plato, where I'm talking about how some of these ideas of totalitarianism have always been with us. And what we do to combat them, that's the big question. So I say in the conclusion, I pray America will awaken to reject being woke. America must return to God if we are to have any hope of preventing these satanic maniacs from actualizing the totalitarian future their ideology dictates. Yet not all is lost. Ultimately, the God of Genesis, who willed, "Let there be light," may stop the malicious four horsemen of the book of Revelation from riding the world to destruction. God can and will pull the plug on the world when and if God so chooses. As Eve came sorrowfully to realize, biting the fruit containing the knowledge of good and evil, was partaking not of divine wisdom, but of the serpent's great lie rooted in hatred of God. And last paragraph of the introduction. I'm writing this book in the hope that it's not too late to beg God's forgiveness. We should have protested in the 1940s when the Supreme Court began taking God out of the schools. But in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, we are assured victory if we can get on our knees and beg God for forgiveness of our sins. As I said repeatedly, in the end, God always wins. In writing this book, the only fear I have is to contemplate what in the end might mean if we fail to turn from these wicked ways. What is at stake is the end of a God-inspired morality and the loss of the freedoms bequeathed to us by our founding fathers. This woke will end up in creating a whole series of disasters. Dollar collapse, we'll have economic failure, crash around the world of economies, which I think could be worse than the Depression, and war, including thermonuclear war. Now, I'm going to be, when we conclude, I've got a private communication here from Archbishop Vigano, which I'm going to read at the conclusion of this today. But the main theme I want to get in today is how broke is this woke? And as I constantly say, woke is broke. To be woke is completely out of money, broke. Things don't work. That's what the left wants to destroy. It's a movement to negate. Okay, so now turning to this Claudine Gay, what Christopher Rufo is saying is that the left has spent decades consolidating power across all these institutions in American life. And the crowning achievement of that is the diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucracy, which is constructed to perpetuate progressive dominance of higher education by keeping conservatives out of universities. Now, Claudine Gay, in some ways, represents the apotheosis of this process. Apotheosis means becoming a god or goddess, and she's like the sacred being, because African American political scientist. She has very thin publishing history, and she became Harvard University's 30th president. And then on Monday, after a whole sequence of scandals, she resigned. Now, what was the tactics that got to this point? Well, I think it was turning against this DEI agenda. So you're seeing that when the universities came out in mass and supported Hamas as a decolonization movement against Israel, so they want to decolonize. This is one of the great themes of this woke critical theory. This critical theory is Marxism. And they want to say that we and all the white nations were colonizing people of color, which means dominating their lands, imposing white rule upon them, and stealing their resources. That's the narrative. Okay, so Hamas's war, against Israel was brutal. They came across even these helicopter kind of design vehicles, sitting in chairs, where they descended upon the Israelis at a concert. The Israelis were unarmed. Israel has been going left as well, and the left always disarmed citizens. So they were helpless. They were raped. They were murdered. They were beheaded. Children were killed. It was brutal. And the world turned against that, except for the universities, which came out saying Hamas was the one whom Israel stole the territory from. Well, there never was a state of Palestine. This is one of the great myths of the left. But the DEI is an ideological control of the universities to teach this Frankfurt School critical theory meaning Marxism. And it's combined with Freudianism, which is what the Frankfurt School was famous for. So they believe that the liberation comes from a culture war that ultimately gets uninhibited sex. That's, some of the great authors of the Frankfurt School, Adorno, Horkheimer, writing a book called The Dialectic of Enlightenment, started praising the Marquis de Sade as the true liberating force. Well, if you've ever read Marquis de Sade, it's very boring pornography, except that it has a political message to it, which is essentially hatred of God, and is essentially embracing evil, because the sex becomes very abusive, becomes very one-sided, very much, using someone sexually rather than engaging in any kind of love or procreation. It's just a bestial activity. Okay, so when it was determined that Gay had plagiarized much of it, how could you have a university president who's plagiarized their doctoral dissertation? So what Rufo did is he conducted an activist campaign against the 3 points of leverage to take down this DEI movement in universities. And he intends to use Claudine Gay as an example of how it can be effective. 3 points of leverage are reputational, financial, and political. Okay, so reputational is fairly easy to see because, again, you had various independent reporters at Washington Free Beacon, Aaron Sibarium, who was applying great reputational pressure, researching and publishing the extent to which Gay had plagiarized her dissertation and her various publications, although there aren't very many of them. And then donors, led by hedge fund manager Bill Ackman, started applying financial pressure, including withdrawing $1 billion in contributions to universities like Harvard. And Congress, under the leadership of Representative Elsie Stefanik, Republican in New York, applied political pressure, exposing Gay's equivocations when she testified before Congress on anti-Semitism. And this made many Jewish students at Harvard and elsewhere feel that they were not secure on campus. Because again, if Hamas is going to rule, they're going to go against Jews. The hatred of Jews is at the heart of Hamas. So throughout this campaign, this was unorthodox for the conservatives to do, because we were, in this instance, you don't have the media. You're not going to get any attention in the media. But the point is, when you attack the universities on reputational, financial, and political bases, these universities stand to lose billions of dollars. Now, Obama was funding the universities by making all these student tuition programs now are 100% government funded. It's like he wanted to do with healthcare, have a sole funder. Well, again, that poured billions of dollars into universities, which allowed them to radicalize and hire professors who were radical. I mean, I left the universities myself in 1981. This decades ago, when I saw this whole thing starting. So these places are worthless. I became a PhD and wanted to teach, and thinking that it was, a noble institution and would pursue truth. And you get there and you find out the universities are hotbeds of Marxism. And unless you're a Marxist, you're not going anywhere. So this campaign was the unorthodox approach of utilizing the tactics that the left uses, because the left wants to get someone off of, want to get Alex Jones off of Twitter. They go to the sponsors of Twitter and they say, don't advertise on Twitter. Don't support Twitter. Okay. And once the advertisers leave, the financial pressure intensifies. Well, what the left has been doing for years, I was at WorldNet Daily from 2004 till 2016, through 2016. And as soon as the YouTube and others began deplatforming or defunding, taking all the ad revenue away, you had publications like WorldNet Daily that had to essentially collapse to survive. So it reduces to very few employees and there's very little revenue. Without revenue, you can't run a business. And that's the economic pressure. Now, there's another article that I thought also was extremely good on this that kind of combined the same themes. And let me pull that one up here for a second, because what I'm finding is we're learning how to beat this woke culture. Essentially, it doesn't work. It produces insanity. Okay, so here's an article, 2024, the year to cancel wokeness. And this is on the Epoch Times. And it was an Epoch Times article written by James Gorey. And he's saying here, essentially, that what's happening in the turning against woke is because people are realizing that it doesn't work, and that what it produces is Orwellian. So a big part, so I'm going to read a little bit of this. Big part of the woke movement's success lies in its Orwellian distortion of language. I emphasize that in my book, Perversion of Language. So the commonly understood meaning of words are inverted to mean the opposite. So words such as tolerance, when the woke say they want to be tolerant, they mean being intolerant of any competing ideas. If you don't agree with their Marxism, you can't speak. Inclusion, which is in the diversity, equity, and inclusion, means excluding traditional ideas, excluding God, trashing marriage, trashing white people, having racism against whites. It's not inclusion. It's not diversity, equity, inclusion. It's a racist idea at its heart, because, again, they're saying anything white is racist. And so, therefore, whites should not be able to participate. You have to confess your white privilege. So DEI is a woke term that's misleading and un-American, but yet it saturates our schools down to the kindergarten level. And when you begin to realize that they're going to want to sexualize children who have no idea what sex is, they haven't reached puberty yet, including getting them to undergo sex change operations and maybe not telling the parents, well, you're fundamentally attacking innocence. Okay, now the point is that they want to put everybody through re-education, including all Trump voters. They despise Bible-believing Christians. The Department of Justice is going after Catholics who like the Latin Mass. And anybody who's pro-Israel Jews, they're definitely the enemy. Most veterans, they hate stay-at-home moms, homeschooling, and they don't like people who drive trucks or SUVs, or people who refuse to, participate in the enthusiasm over lockdowns. Those who think there's only two genders. Those who think that climate alarmism is a fraud, as I do. Those who think that President Trump should be reelected. So these meanings of these words, environmental, social, and governance, ESG, okay, and the stakeholder capitalism, so investing according to these green principles, which is essentially socialist. And it does not true investing, because you're paying a premium and taking less investment return to pick companies which are going to do ESG, even if it costs the company money. So the woke ideology has nothing to do with the traditional values or morals that have built a strong nation, that have created a free people, at the heart of capitalism, at the heart of free enterprise. So the key to stopping this movement, this author is saying, is take a page out of their own playbook and cancel the woke mob at every time they seek to show up. And the campaigns that have been successful against Bud Light, against Target, against Disney, which loses billions of dollars, and even people considering Amazon, because there's an Amazon alternative called publicsquare.com. So again, there are alternatives. Now, the fundamental, I believe, attack on woke is illustrated biblically, which is to show people what the fruit of the tree is. So let's say, what does woke produce? Well, they want you to eat bugs. They want you to live in 15-minute cities. They don't want you to be able to drive cars. You're going to live in tiny houses, which you don't own. And you're going to have central bank digital currency, which can be turned off. The state is going to monitor everything you do, including what you think. And if this is the way you want to live, then woke should be good for you. But if you don't, then it's time to get rid of woke, and exposing how it doesn't work. And that's going to devote the remainder of this program to explaining how that can be accomplished. But Chris, you want to comment at this point? I think we've covered a lot here already, and why don't you tell us what you're thinking?
Oh, you took a lot of my answers already, but the idea is we should restore wokeness to what it was and what it should be, a subject of ridicule. I mean, these people were the crazy, the crazy types back in I guess before Obama was elected. These are the people who said, well, I understand we have equality now, but now we have to push people forward. They're the ones that invented spelling, whole language. They're the ones that invented social promotion. Unfortunately, it was taken seriously within the academic circles and, of course, the public education circles. The fact is, the rest of us were like, "This is crazy." But now the era of legitimizing all of this has to end to save the country, and pretty much to save the Western world too, because the other ideas of allowing open borders and mass immigration, and again, I'm not talking about the legal immigration. I'm talking about just letting anybody in, regardless of their backgrounds or their intent to come here. These are all ways to destroy. These are designed ways to destroy nations, and obviously, this is a World Economic Forum issue that we have to deal with in the future. But wokeness is a product of all of this, and wokeness is also the cause. Again, has to be stopped. We used to make fun of these people.
I agree. I mean, this is, and let's talk about the electric vehicles, because I think this is the last story I want to cover.
That's another one.
Yeah. Well, again, yeah, the electric vehicles are a good illustration of what this woke is all about, because they don't work and people aren't buying them. Okay, so there's an article on that I thought was quite good too today, and I'm going to cover it here because this is an article that appeared. Yeah, let me see exactly. It was written by realclearwire.com, which is a good source for stories that are meant to be reposted. It was written by Dugan Flanagan, and he covers the electric vehicles, I think, extremely well. He's an analyst, a policy analyst at the Committee for Constructive Tomorrow. Okay, and what he's saying is that the EVs, Biden has said he wants to have all cars, or he's got huge goals for people to have only electric vehicles. So in 2021, he drove a Ford F-150 Lightning, and he said he even wanted to electrify the White House presidential limousine. The armed presidential limousine is known as the Beast, which, by the way, weighs about 15,000 to 20,000 pounds. It's got armored and high-tech features, oversized truck frame, twice the weight of a GMC Hummer EV. So this Beast would require a massive battery to operate, to provide any real protection. And by the way, if the battery failed, the Beast is like a sitting coffin. It can't protect you at all. Okay, Chris, what do you think?
You can't even go on a road trip with those things. You might recall last year when Secretary Jennifer Granholm, not Grisham, Secretary Granholm tried to pull off a cross-country road trip in an electric vehicle, and it went terribly bad. She had trouble finding places to go, and when she did, she had to wait in long lines. The fact is, there are serious problems with the Biden mandates. Joe Biden just wants to go down, and he's a lot like Vladimir Putin, if you really think about it. Vladimir Putin wants to go down in history as the guy who reunited the Soviet Union, while Joe Biden's the guy who wants to go down in history as the guy who saved the world from climate change.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, Biden's goal in the Granholm was to electrify even military vehicles, including tanks and aircraft, by 2030. That's going to cost billions of dollars or trillions of dollars. Just print it up. We don't care. So, if the Army is going to take 242,000 tactical vehicles and make them into electric vehicles, we're going to have an army that needs to be plugged in order to work. We're going to get the electricity in a battlefield.
Right. Sales are not working. And as you know, I do have the Biden administration is running defense for the fact that these things are failing too, by the way.
Play the clip we've got. Describe it, and let's play the clip.
Okay. Basically, yesterday, and we're talking on Friday, so it's Thursday, January 4th's press secretary's briefing. Again, we don't even know who the press secretary is now. Is it KJP or is it John Kirby? But we'll get into that another time.
This
is Karine Jean-Pierre trying to justify the terrible. I'm not saying lackluster. I mean abysmal electronic vehicle sales.
So Ford today says that in 2023, last year, their EV sales accounted for 3.6% of their overall sales. GM says that it only sold half of what their target was for EV sales. Any consideration to moving some of those EV mandates back and let the technology and market preference catch up?
So, Ed, I'll say to you that we have seen 51% of an increase in EV sales. 51%. That's the numbers, and that's across the board. That's the data that we have seen. I'm sure you've seen that number as well. And so I think that's pretty important as we talk about climate change, clean energy. That's important that we're seeing such a boost in electric vehicles.
But when you look at the actual numbers, like GM sold 2.6 million cars and trucks in 2023. 76,000 of those were EVs. Ford sold 2 million cars and trucks. 73,000 were EVs. So clearly about 96% of the consumer is saying that they don't want electric vehicles. So why not?
We saw a 51% increase in electric vehicles. That's what we've seen, and that's important to note.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, I mean, the point is that they're not selling, and this 51%, I don't know where she concocted this number, but it is not what the statistics show. The statistics show is that General Motors has pushed back the opening of an electric truck factory in Detroit after scrapping an earlier goal of producing 400,000 EVs over a 2-year period through 2024.
Oh, here's something funny. You think about this. I have $1, and I just found 50 cents on the floor. I now increased what I had in my pocket by 50%.
I know the numbers are small, and that's the White House is playing defense. White House knows it's got a losing argument here. Ford just announced it was cutting production of Biden's beloved F-150 Lightning pickups in half to just 1,800 vehicles per week for 2024. It's on the heels of cutting the price by $10,000, despite the fact that that Ford is already losing $66,000 for every electric vehicle that comes off the assembly lines. So this is a way it's going to bankrupt car manufacturers if they go along with this agenda. And by the way, these vehicles have no resale value, so they're dropping more than half of their value in resale, and they're not being bought. People don't want a used electric vehicle. And so therefore, when Biden's dream of an all-electric vehicle fleet, there was an April 2023 Gallup poll that showed only 12% of American auto buyers, just 1% of GOP voters were seriously considering purchasing an electric vehicle. So these things just don't work. Why don't they work? The batteries catch fire. There's not enough charging stations. They have to go very short distances in order not to run out of fuel before they find a charging vehicle, a charging station that works. So they're not practical, except maybe for, they're like elaborate golf carts, and you can ride around the city with them. But if you try to go anywhere in any significant interstate highway trip, you're going to find you don't want to have an electric vehicle. And again, the operational nature of these vehicles is extremely difficult in that they have different characteristics. They accelerate very fast. And once they lose electricity or have any kind of mechanical failure, they're just dead pieces of weight, which are even hard to roll if they can be rolled at all. So these EV mandates are ideologically driven. They're not market driven. And that was the point of the question. So you're finding that people are not flocking to electric vehicles. Hybrids have a little bit better chance because they are still gas vehicles where the gas generates the electricity. But again, this is the point I'm making throughout this whole podcast, is that what the woke left, radical left wants to do doesn't work. Their ideas are bad. Electric cars were the original idea of automobiles, and it was abandoned because gasoline-powered cars were more robust. Gasoline is a more powerful fuel. You can use it. It's there to use when you want it. If you're with electric, you got to hope the sun is shining to get solar. With these renewables, you have to hope the wind is blowing. And right now, wind farms are not being financed because the costs of building these are just too high given the inflation and the interest rate environment that we're in. So the push by political mandates to go electric it contradicts the fundamental physics of energy, and it contradicts the fact that these are not practical vehicles, not for any extensive amount of driving the way most people use their automobiles. As I say, you want to run around the city in a golf cart or a bicycle, I guess you can do it. But the point is, you want to go from Washington, D.C. to somewhere out in the Midwest, having an electric vehicle is going to make that a very difficult trip. And despite all the billions in subsidies, if there were not subsidies, these programs would all die. And the point of them seems to be to allow Biden's friends or Obama's friends under Solyndra to get wealthy. Now, I want to conclude today that we have a private communication from Archbishop Vigano. Archbishop Vigano has been an outspoken critic of Pope Francis. He was the representative of the Vatican to the United States. He's gotten removed from that position. And he wrote a very good letter here. And I want to read just a couple of paragraphs of this. He's calling this whole woke a plan, which is a criminal plan of world depopulation. Well, it is. And he says what is serious about this neo-Malthusian project of mass extermination, to which is added the will to control each of us through graphene oxide nanostructures, has been announced to us for some time in the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum, which conceived and implemented some of these ideas. The rulers of all Western states, hostage to Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab, have become accomplices to this crime, demonstrating their malice and premeditation by their behavior, falsifying data, etc., in order to have the lockdown. Now, what he's saying is that in this attack, unprecedented in the history of the human race, we have witnessed the capacity of all national and international institutions, the entire medical profession, and the media in a social engineering operation, the lockdown, which was carried out to manipulate consensus through terror, threats, blackmail, and the violation of citizens' most sacred rights. Okay, now he's saying fundamentally it's an attack against God and humanity. That's what it comes down to, and he's right. And this paragraph I thought was particularly powerful. Let me just find it here for a minute. He says this global coup d'etat must be denounced, and those responsible must be tried and judged by an international court. But above all, it is necessary for all of us to understand that this all-out war against humanity is not motivated only by the lust for wealth and power, but mainly by a religious motive, a theological reason. The reason is Satan's hatred of God, hatred of God's creation, and hatred of human beings who are created in the image and likeness of God. Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, and the hundreds of servants whom they blackmail in governments all hate God. They hate life, which only God can give. They hate love, which comes only from God. They hate peace, which can reign only where Christ reigns. As Tucker Carlson said a few days ago, we're facing people who serve Satan and the demons of hell, just as normal people worship and serve God. That's the fundamental point, that this is a spiritual war. And the world that this woke generation is trying to create, first, the woke are only destructive. The woke can only destroy. Once they succeed destroying the United States or destroying West, destroying the Enlightenment, the woke will have to be eliminated, because the Klaus Schwabs and the oligarchs who take over thinking that they're going to become transhuman They're going to merge with their machines. They're going to plant chips in themselves, and they're going to have superordinary powers. And they don't need the rest of us. That's where it's going. They'll take over, and in the process, they could eliminate billions of people, which is the plan. They don't think they think Harari, this guy who is one of the spokespeople for the World Economic Forum, he says that we're going to create useless people. People are only useless if you have no spirituality, if no concept of God, no concept of the value of life. And if we put those people in charge, they're going to produce economic destruction. They're going to produce wars. They're going to produce famine. And thermonuclear war is on their agenda. Now, I want to conclude by a couple of things. Number one, if you like the program and like what we're doing, please do support our sponsors. You can get a copy of this free book, and I'm encouraging everybody to get it, which is the How a Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush. I wrote it with Dean Heskin. There's a lot on the website. If you go to the sponsors, you get a free copy of this book by calling Swiss America, the toll-free number, 1-800-519-6268. Write it down, 1-800-519-6268. The free book is How the Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush. It's a short book. It was easy to read. It covers a lot of the history of the 1970s when we had an energy crisis, 2008, 2009, when the subprime real estate market crashed and we had a credit crash. It shows that gold has always, in these periods of economic distress, increased in value. Also, take a look at the book I've written here with Chris Burries, another short book, Live Longer, Live Longer and Better. Okay, and this is about Carbon 60, another one of our sponsors. If you go up to the sponsors and click at the top of the page, you can either bring down Swiss America or My Vital C. My Vital C is Carbon 60, and it has remarkable longevity properties. I'm going back into telemedicine. We will have a getlongevitymeds.com going soon, and we will have a program of GetRxMeds.com. Those are two websites I'm going to create, and they'll be operational in the first quarter. But again, take a look at these products. They are extremely good. They're also available for dogs and cats. And our cats and dogs love it. And so My Vital C, Carbon 60, it's a remarkable molecule discovered about 40 years ago, which is like 60 carbon atoms in a cage structure, like a geodesic dome. They're called fullerenes after Buckminster Fuller, around a nucleus. And they're put into olive oil, coconut oil, and they are remarkable. I've been taking it for 4 years, and I think they have products for hair, they have products for skin, and I really recommend you give them a try. And do talk to Swiss America, because what we're going into, it would be a very good idea to have some gold. Gold has been holding at above $2,000 an ounce. Let's just check as we close out here what the gold price is today. So on January 5th, 2024, gold is still over $2,000 an ounce. It's $2,046 an ounce. And I think you'll find it to be a exceptional value. Had you invested even last year when we were talking about this, your gold would have appreciated in value. It was then selling at under $2,000 an ounce. And your purchasing power of your dollars continues to collapse. Continue to get fewer goods with the same dollar. And people are spending a lot more money just to maintain what they had as a standard of living a few years ago. Is costing dramatically more today. And the currency, the way we're printing it up, is headed towards a massive collapse. Chris, any final comments as we wrap up?
Ending wokeness doesn't happen overnight. This has been going on for decades. It was, as I said, it was something we made fun of a long time ago. Okay, maybe we didn't take it that seriously. Now, here's another thing you should notice. You talked about Claudine Gay and her plagiarism and her lack of scholarly work in the first place. Ibrahim X. Kendi was already exposed for that sort of thing just last year, as a matter of fact, as well. The man comes up with this critical race theory, doesn't really back it up academically, just with emotional arguments. And his scholarly works have made Claudine Gay look like Dennis Prager, if you will. Okay,
Right.
It's terrible. And by the way, the rampant, as the left would put it, misogyny and sexual harassment within his organization should probably speak volumes as well.
Pedophiles. This more and more is coming out about Jeffrey Epstein and his blackmailing and using young underage girls to seduce powerful, rich men.
Right.
Bill Clinton's probably the poster boy child here.
Now, I do want to warn people. There are people on the left. There are. Chris Hayes did a whole thing about this too. He actually did a whole thing on MSNBC about running defense for people on the Epstein list. Aside from one person, of course, the left is going to try to pull out that one picture of Melania, Donald Trump, and of course the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And there's another fake picture circulating as well. People should remember, the fact is, Epstein was persona non grata from what? Was it 2002 or shortly after that, where after he was hitting on an underage girl, Epstein that was, hitting on an underage girl at the Mar-a-Lago complex. So he was not a Trump associate or anything, even though he tried to worm his way into the circle after that happened. And that, of course, is when he was a big Clinton donor too. So let's also put that into perspective.
FBI. He was working with the FBI. I mean, the whole thing is just rotten.
Yes.
And this is at its core, it's going to fail because evil always fails. It's just sometimes evil can be catastrophic in its horrible consequences. So let's wrap up. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Friday. It's January 5th, 2024. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. I hate to think of the consequences of the judgment of God that we're going to face. And I encourage everybody under 2 Chronicles 7:14 to let's get on our knees. Let's ask God for forgiveness for letting this insanity get to where it is today. And what 2 Chronicles 7:14 says is God will hear our prayer and heal our land. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. We'll be back on Monday. Continue to visit us with thetruthcentral.com. Take a look at the website. Follow us on Twitter at CorsiJerome1 and on Substack at JeromeCorsiPhD.substack.com. Thank you for joining us today. God bless.